Welcome to IZUMI YouTube Graduate School. Well, we are going to talk about global English as a means of communication, how it works and doesn't. Well, first of all, what it's like. That's the first topic. And second, the way to win a better understanding beyond cultural differences. Well, the global English is defined as follows. Language allowing first understandable local dialects in pronunciation and different ways of thinking stemming from cultural differences, and third, common English grammar and words in the native countries, and lastly, grammar and words shared by the English-speaking communities across borders. These are rough picture of global English. Well, then second comes, please take a close look at this map. Well, North America and Australia and Britain. Well, these are this category: states and territories in which English or English Creole is the first language of majority of the populations. Well, this area, in terms of the population, majority use English, and some of them use English Creole. Creole looks like English, but a little bit different from so-called authentic English. Well, second of all, states and territory in which English is an official but not majority language. Well, India, South Africa, Philippines and Malaysia and other part of the African nations, we have this the category of the country. Well, I've lived in Malaysia, then a little bit touch upon how language situation goes in Malaysia. Well, Malay people speak Malay and Chinese ethnicity, Chinese language, and Indian speak Tamil language, but they speak English there. But this English is also a little bit different from English in US or Britain. Maybe this English might be categorized here. But in this category, based on Wikipedia, Singapore and Malaysia and other part of area belongs to these categories. Well, then more widely we see list of countries by English-speaking population. Well, as long as over 20 or 40% we see many areas or many countries or territories here and there. While in Asia, English is acceptable, and other areas as well. Then this map shows English might be influential language, but we find these English different. Then global English might be this area. Well, we have British English and we have American English, and we have common structure or common grammar and common words. But we have the different pronunciation and different way of expressions and so on. But basically, British English and American English are typical or model of the English. But at the same time, we should recognize other different factors of English. Then that might be called global English. Well, second comes the way to come to good the communication. English should be used as a major ways of the communications, many means of the communications. Then if we analyze exactly what the culture is in terms of the linguistic point of view, Edward T. Hall divided into two categories of context culture: low context culture and high context culture. Low context culture, or linguistically, one word, one meaning. One word has one meaning. That's a typical way of the definitions of low context language in low context culture. But this culture might be defined this way: a culture that communicates information in direct manner that relies mainly on words. Then good communication is precise, simple, and clear. And messages are expected to be understood at face value. And reputation is appreciated if it helps clarify the communication. Each word should be precise, simple, and clear. And one word has one meaning. Message should be understood at face value. That means one word, one meaning. Then if something wrong in understanding one word, then others could ask precisely, and that way of the style will be appreciated. Then next comes high context culture. It's a culture that communicates information in indirect manner and relies heavily on implicit message and contextual cues. high context culture language, typically one word, several meanings. Well, typically in Japanese words, no means sometimes yes, sometimes no. Yes means sometimes no, sometimes yes. One word has at least two meanings. One word has two meanings. Then we should read, or we should understand between the lines, both spoken Japanese and written Japanese. If we focus on Japanese language belongs to the language in high context culture. The messages are often implied, not plainly expressed. Implied, not directly written or not directly spoken, but others guess what one guy said. That's the typical way of the expressions in high context cultures. We have many reasons why low context culture is suitable, or why low context culture is low context culture goes with heterogeneous society. Because many people get together. For instance, in US, immigrants from EU, immigrants from Africa, they get together in US from different parts of the world. That makes US, as a US, it's very shorter history and smaller amount of shared information, because each of them, they have their own informations. The person who from the EU, they have EU's culture, and Africa, they have own Africans information. Then smaller amount of shared information, and there are a variety of values. One guy believe Christianity, one guy believe Islam, and one guy from Asia believe Buddhism or other Asian religions. But as long as society with high context culture, it's homogeneous, such as Japan, Korea, and China, then that makes longer history and larger amount of shared information because homogeneous, and they have common value because they are homogeneous. Well, here comes the cultural map. Low context culture, high context one. They tend to be explicit, and high context culture tend to be implicit. US is one of representative of low context culture. Japan or Japanese culture is Japanese culture represents high context culture. But here are many the countries between US and Japan. These are the cultural map. We are implicit way of the communication, and Americans explicit. They make more questions. They make more questions explicitly. But Japanese make less questions. They guess what speaker said. They try to understand implicitly, but speaker also express implicitly. But they know each other because they share longer history, large amount of shared information, and common value. But Americans are forced to express explicitly because they have shorter history, smaller amount of shared information, and variety of values. Then that makes them explicit. Way of the communication is very explicit. Otherwise, they don't understand each other. But Japan, although implicit way of the communication, but they could understand because of longer history, large amount of shared information, and common values. Then the way of the communication, way of the expressions is totally different. Then what happens when a person from implicit way of communication and person from explicit? Well, in conclusion, global English brings us a better communications because English covers Japan and other part of the area. Rest of the world, English can be used in many occasions. But at the same time, as long as speaker recognize which linguistic society he or she belongs to, and who he or she speaks, we should recognize our own culture. That culture belongs to low context or high context. First, we should know Mr. A, for instance, Mr. A from Japan. Mr. A belongs to high context culture. Then the way of the expression, they have typical expression characteristics. Here, message or contextual cues, implicit and sophisticated. Good communication means sophisticated, nuanced, and layered. And spoken or written Japanese should be understand between lines. And the Japanese hesitate to say plainly. But Americans try to express precise, simple, clear. They ask more. Then we should Mr. A from Japan recognize is requested to recognize we are I'm from the high context cultures background. Then Mr. A's characteristics of expression. He or she is requested to know the way of Japanese style of expression. But that doesn't work well if we meet Mr. B from US. Then the way of communication should be changed. But at the same time, Mr. B from US should recognize his background, whether the culture belongs to high context or low context. Then based on the characteristics of cultural background, he could make suitable questions or suitable way of the expressions. Then he should recognize counterparts cultural backgrounds. Then person try to speak something are requested to know in what culture the counterpart belongs to. Then we reach good result of the communications. If not, the more we speaks, the more he or she miscommunicate. Then conclusion is here. English is one of better language to communicate because it's a global language. But since it's global language, we tends to tend to misunderstand others' expressions, which comes from different culture, high context culture or low context cultures. Then conclusion here brings the global English, bring us better communication as long as we know what we are and what others are, particularly cultural backgrounds. Well, this concludes IZUMI YouTube Graduate School. We take up the topic global English as a means of communication, how it works and it doesn't. Thank you for your joining us. This concludes today's session. Thank you.